Welcome to Beyond the Numbers, the podcast where conversations about wealth go deeper. This isn't about flashy success or one-size-fits-all advice. It's about real people designing financial lives that align with who they are, what they value, and the legacies they're building. We bring together voices from business, finance, law, and leadership to talk about the moments that shape them and the strategies that sustain them. Here is your host, Chris Everett.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Beyond the Numbers, where money meets meaning and purpose. Today we have an extraordinary conversation ahead of us. What if I told you that one of the world's most innovative industrial designers spent a year kind of living on a shoestring as a visiting faculty at Carnegie Mellon, just so he could pursue a vision that would transform how millions of people see themselves? Today's guest has designed products for Apple, Nike, Palm, Sony, and Silicon Graphics. He holds over 40 design and utility patents. His designs have earned international awards from IDSA, IDEA, Good Design, and Core 77. He's taught at Stanford University, Carnegie Mellon, and Singularity University. And 5 of his concepts are in the Cooper Hewitt Museum's permanent collection. But here's what makes his story so powerful. In 2008, he actually walked away from a successful career designing consumer electronics to tackle something that seemed impossible. He saw people with prosthetic limbs hiding under pants and long sleeves, ashamed of medical devices that screamed disability rather than celebrating humanity. So he founded Bespoke Innovations, the first company to combine 3D body scanning with 3D printing to create custom prosthetic limbs that aren't just functional, but beautiful. Limbs covered in leather and tattoo designs. Limbs that look like mid-century modern sculpture or motorcycle parts. Limbs that people want to show off, not hide. He revolutionized an industry that hadn't changed in decades. His prosthetics cost $4,000 to $6,000, which is 1/10 of the price of traditional custom limbs costing $60,000. He helped soldiers, athletes, models, and everyday people reclaim their identity and their confidence. Paralympic athletes wore his designs. Amputees started wearing shorts and skirts again. They went back to playing soccer. They started conversations with strangers instead of avoiding eye contact. After selling Bespoke to 3D Systems and serving as their director of design, he could have retired. But instead, he founded Ethereal Matter, where he's now exploring the intersection of virtual reality, haptics, and robotics to gamify fitness and health, creating full-body immersive experiences that turn exercise into play. So today, we're talking about design with soul, innovation born from empathy, the courage to pivot your career, and what it means to build businesses that restore dignity and joy to people's lives. So please help me welcome Scott Summit, founder of Ethereal Matter and industrial designer. Scott, welcome to Beyond the Numbers.
Hi, Chris. Thanks for having me on your show.
Absolutely. Hey, let's start with that moment back in 2008 when you made what seems like an insane decision. Right? You left a successful design career to live on a dime, as they say, as a visiting professor at Carnegie Mellon so you could pursue this vision of beautiful prosthetics. What possessed you to do that? And what did you see that made you think this is worth sacrificing everything for?
Yeah, Carnegie Mellon is one of those schools that I'd always admired. The work that comes out of it and the overall pedagogy, it seems to be one of these places that has this amazing mix of where science and design and technology all interact. And when I had the opportunity to drop everything and move out to Pittsburgh and teach there, I jumped on that. I think it was a 5-minute phone call that got me to agree and go out there. And one of the things that you realize when you're teaching is that you actually learn more than your students. because for every 45-minute lecture, you're doing hours and hours of prep. And so I learned more in design and about design and technology and materials and processes in the field in that year of teaching than in the rest of my career combined, because that's just the nature of teaching. So it was as rewarding for me as it was for the students, but also probably as intellectually fulfilling as one could imagine.
That's so great. So you give your students this challenge at Carnegie. Use 3D scanning and parametric modeling to design prosthetic limbs that weren't just functional, but inspirational. You didn't even say beautiful, you said inspirational. So, and when your students nailed it, you realized there was a real avenue here. So tell us about that teaching moment and what did your students show you that you just hadn't seen before?
Yeah, I had an amazing bunch of students, and we explored the idea of what is function. When you're talking about prosthetic leg, we use the word function very rigidly to say that it's something that helps you walk. It fills a void. It reifies the body based on something that wasn't there, original equipment that's been lost. But that we found to be a very limited definition of function. Maybe the role of function in a prosthetic limb is to get a person to thrive. And thriving has multiple facets to it. One of them, yes, is to walk and to run and climb and things like that. But the other is to let a person engage with their surroundings, with people around them, with themselves, in a sense. So that became the goal, was never to dismiss function, but to expand its definition.
So that why it's really why it was so important to bring beauty and personalization into these prosthetics then, right?
Because we personalize everything. You know, you look at the watch you're wearing or your glasses or even your phone. Take it further and your motorcycle or your car, the things that become extensions of our body in a sense or our being. Those are highly personal, I should say, on every level. And we're really doing a disservice if those are generic and purely utilitarian. We wanted to say, no, no, this device of all things, it's a part of your body. It needs to be as much a sense of extension and self-expression as any other thing that you might have on or around you.
So this makes sense then. So then you interviewed the amputees, found out what made them tick, and then designed limbs based on their interest and tastes, like whether it was mid-century modern, motorcycles, leather, tattoos, whatever it was. But then you called these custom coverings fairings. So walk us through what happened when someone put on one of your fairings for the first time and what changed for them.
Yeah, a couple things. It was an experiment. It was kind of an intellectual effort that we dove into. But one of our test pilots, I guess, Deborah, we made this leg for her and we worked with her and got to know her personality. She texted me the next day from the grocery store. And it was really touching. She said, a guy just came up to me in the vegetable section and said that I've got the coolest leg he's ever seen in his life. And I texted her back, hey, that's great to hear. And she said, wait, you don't understand. People don't say that to amputees. That's never been said before. And she was really moved by that. She went and bought skirts because she wanted to show this leg. It was, beautiful chrome and white leather and top stitching. And we really went to town on making her that leg. And then because it was so successful, we made her a couple more so that she could swap them out, just like one would a pair of shoes or any other part of fashion. And that was really rewarding for us and certainly very fulfilling for her.
Can totally see that. I mean, I'm sure you have a million stories
Yes.
that are similar, right? So,
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
it's like you just didn't design a better product. You help people reclaim their identity, their personhood, you know?
It was about fulfilling a void in their life, not a void on their body. You can make something that props somebody up, but making somebody feel like their life is more whole than it was before, that takes a level of nuance and it takes a dimension that isn't captured in your traditional, purely utilitarian prosthetic limb.
Yeah, well, and you talk about nuance. So one of the things I found fascinating too is that you were using the 3D scanning of a person's intact leg or arm or whatever it was to create that symmetric reference geometry so that the prosthetic fairing actually recreated their own body symmetry. That's a powerful idea. So you did this all at 1/10 of the cost of traditional custom prosthetics. How did you make that economically work?
There's some qualification that needs to be thrown in there. What we were creating was the fairing, which is the surrounding of the pipe and the regular raw mechanical components that get somebody to walk. That was low cost, but they still needed their existing hardware because we weren't at that point becoming a medical product. We were being more of essentially a fashion or design product at that point. But we evolved the company toward a bigger goal, which was to be able to 3D scan somebody with a common phone or a mobile device, send that scan up to the cloud. The cloud would then capture it, prepare a 3D print ready limb for them, and then send it to a printer that would then print it and then have it mailed to them. We can do that for about $6,000, which is a very small fraction of the price. The challenge there is that we proved out the technology, but it is ideally suited for somebody in a very poor country where they need their mobility. They need their leg more than we do in the US, where we're very car focused. These are people who are very much in need of a leg, but also they don't have $6,000 to put towards a leg very often, especially an amputee. So when we went to investors, they showed us the door. When we went to some of the charitable foundations and foundations that focus on things like this, even they said it's a money pit for us. We love the idea, but we can't shovel cash into it until it's a self-sustaining process. So we created a leg. It's actually on permanent collection in the Cooper Hewitt Museum in New York, and so it can be seen anytime. But the process had to be shelved because we simply couldn't get investors to back continued development of it. So even though it's painful for us, because even though we can solve a fairly major global problem, we can't without funding and backing.
So then Bespoke Ventures, where's it at right now?
So Bespoke was acquired by 3D Systems, which was essentially the Microsoft of 3D printing. It invented the technology, and it's one of the larger of the companies. The team that I assembled there was acquired and folded into different parts of the company. They are often doing phenomenal things. I can't say because of secrecy, but the things that are going to come out of that company are pretty mind-blowing, because 3D printing, even though it's not headline news anymore, it is doing some very, very exciting stuff. It's just subtle and sometimes behind the scenes.
Yeah, no, and I've seen 3D printing print homes, for Pete's sake. It's pretty incredible right now.
Oh, and you've barely seen the start of it. What is coming down the pipes will really blow some people away if we can turn our attention off of AI for a few minutes.
Okay, I'll be waiting. So after 3D Systems, you advised companies on strategic implementation of 3D printing across many industries: musical instruments, medical devices, sports equipment, space travel, acoustics, architecture. What did you learn from seeing 3D printing applied in so many different contexts? And what surprised you about where the technology could go? I know you can't discuss what you just said was very secret, but give us some idea of what you see.
The thing that's most surprising is the breadth of its trajectories, that it goes everywhere from printing in outer space. I was a part of a company called Made in Space that sent the first 3D printers to the space station. And they printed, I think, 2,500 mission critical parts since then. And now 3D printing in space is just seen as a standard normal thing. That was a rush to be involved in that. But then you go into the small scale stuff and printing very, very fine metal parts that were unmakeable in any way before, whether it is for medical implants or corrective devices or technology devices of any kind, cooling systems, things like that. That's now possible. Biologics, where it's not too far off that we'll be able to print lungs and other tissue. Things, yeah. Printing food, we worked hard on that. We got to sugar, chocolate, and pasta, but the big potential there is in pharma. Printing houses, that is another exciting field. A man named Ronald Real is doing some absolutely astounding work in that area. So it really is going every direction at once. It just isn't necessarily getting headline news anymore.
Yeah, I can see that 3D printing in space is a no-brainer. Building houses with a 3D printer is a no-brainer. I kind of draw the line at food and medicine, but hey, that's my own ignorance. I get it. So you founded Ethereal Matter, which explores the overlap of virtual reality, haptics, and robotics to gamify fitness and health. So, a very different direction. That seems like a big departure from prosthetics. Or is it? What's the through line connecting bespoke and ethereal matter in your mind?
Exactly. To me, they're one and the same. That Bespoke was about using technology and using design to address a nuance in the human experience and human challenges. We're doing the exact same thing with the robot that you see behind me here. Ethereal is using today's technology, in this case, robotics, haptics, sensor fusion, virtual reality, to solve a big problem that is only growing, which is that we have transitioned from an active lifestyle to a sedentary lifestyle. We do everything in our lives seated now. And our health is the worst in known human history, in known Homo sapien history. It's as bad as it's ever been, and it's only going to get worse unless corrected. So to me, that's that fairly sizable global challenge that needs to be addressed. And our platform sets out to nibble at it, maybe knock it out of the park. We'll see.
Okay, so you've built something called MEK, a full body motion platform that provides force feedback for immersive VR experiences. You can feel things, hit them, pull them, engage your hands, feet, arms, legs, and you're developing games and fitness programs ranging from light entertainment to full on sports. So tell us about the vision here and what problems are you solving now with ethereal matter?
Yeah. So the challenge is that we have 100,000 gyms in the country. We have plenty of gyms, but they attract only the kind of person who is attracted to the gym. It sounds like a silly thing to say, but what it means is that a lot of the world, a lot of the US certainly is being left out because the gym is just unappealing. They get plenty of satisfaction playing video games on the sofa, or it's just too boring and monotonous to simply do reps on weights. It's something we all should be doing. It helps circulation and bone density and muscle mass and all the things that we really need moving forward with our lives as we age, especially. But it's really boring to do that repetitively. And so as a result, if you solve for boredom, you solve for public health. It's as simple as that.
It's
So
brilliant.
it seems like a simple enough thing, but that is our challenge is we have to solve for boredom here. And the way we do that is the same way every other animal does it. You know, baby panthers solve for boredom by wrestling with each other, and they find that exhilarating, and so they do it. What they're really doing is training themselves and building their musculature and their reflexes, all the things they need to grow into an adult. We did the same as kids. I climbed trees and rode my bike and played in the mud. And that was really necessary training for becoming a physical adult. The challenge is that the digital age gave us play in the form of sitting on the sofa with a phone or an iPad. And play is great unless the price of admission is spending your childhood immobile, in which case it's a massive global health consequence. And that's what we're certainly seeing now.
Yeah, and you have many parents listening right now saying, "Oh yes, help me get my kid off the sofa."
Yeah. Yeah, I'm one myself. And even with my kind of hypersensitivity to the topic, it's still a battle. It's still something I wrestle with because it's the games are designed for addiction. They are very smartly designed to draw you in and keep you there.
So you said that many VR experiences fall into that one hit wonder category. It's fun once, but no real urge to repeat. And that the MEK, which I'd love to know what that stands for, is different because it's a universal motion platform that can support any experience within the full range of human motion. So talk more about that. What kind of experiences are you building?
Yeah, so we set out to create something that was not limited in what it could offer. We wanted something that could offer any kind of activity that we could dream up. And that activity would be a hybrid of something physical, like essentially the invisible equivalent of a gym workout, but also something that's really fun that you want to do anyway. So, for example, if you are on a pod racer speeder out of Star Wars and you are in a battle and your controls are forward and back with your hands and leaning and pitching and moving your feet side to side to steer and to navigate, that is according to the gym, that's a phenomenal full body workout. That's all the activity you need. Now you're doing it because you're shooting your friends and you're being shot at by your friends. So you're going to conjure all the energy you can ever want to do it, and you'll do it more because that becomes really, really fun. But you're also doing bench presses, rows, single arm, double arm on an imbalanced platform. So the physical therapist loves it, the kid loves it, everybody wins in that case.
Do you have some show and tell for us?
Yeah, so I can show you the machine here. I'll walk over to it. The way it's set up is two armatures. They cover the entire human range of motion. So up, down, side, side, anything in between. They have sensors in them, so they detect your motion going in, and they know what you intend to do, and they can either guide it, they can add resistance, they can add force feedback, they can add vibration, anything that they want because they are controlled by motors. And you're wearing a VR headset. So while you're in the scene, what you see corresponds to what you see of yourself inside and what you're doing. So if you're on a pod racer out of Star Wars, you see the pod racer, you see yourself in it. Your hands, feet, eyes, ears, everything is convinced that you are in the scene. And so that's what that level of transposition from reality into a physical virtual environment is super addictive. It's super compelling because you're now transported into a different world with all your senses.
But one thing I'm troubled with is seeing that unit in everybody's house. So what's the game plan?
It's probably not destined for the homes except for the wealthiest, and we've certainly had a lot of offers from them. But no, we're aiming for fitness centers, gyms, for example, because they have a real problem with attrition. People sign on in January when they look in the mirror, and they leave in July when they realize they're bored and they're not going. So they have a sine wave revenue stream, which is bad for them. We're looking at cruise ships. People go to get out of their head. We're looking at casinos. People looking for a new experience. We're looking at universities because, for example, I went to a school on the East Coast, which was in a dangerous city with bad weather on a small campus. So we really didn't have anything to do physically. And instead, if I could have this machine and I could go flying across the California coastline or soaring through the Grand Canyon or riding a magic carpet across the Sahara anytime I wanted, that would be something that I would choose to do as the escape from Baltimore. But also, it would give me the physical activity that I need, the endorphins, the dopamine, circulation, the immune system, all of those activities which really have to happen and are triggered by physical activity.
Yeah. So what's your time frame for all this? Kind of like when I go to the gym the next time, when am I going to see one of your machines there?
We're talking to a number of groups right now. We are seeking investment, just straight up. When we can fill our investment, we are ready to pull the trigger. We have manufacturers lined up. The machine is ready for manufacturing. We have the code written. We have partners in place. So we're really just we're ramping up our funding, and when that is full, we will be in super high gear.
Sounds good. Sounds good. So this show is called Beyond the Numbers because we believe the best decisions is when money meets meaning and purpose. So you have this incredible career arc from designing consumer electronics for Apple and Nike to revolutionizing prosthetics to now building immersive fitness experience. How do you think about that intersection of money and meaning and purpose in your own life and work? So what's really driving your choices?
Yeah, I think there are two very different types of entrepreneurs. There are those who look at market opportunity and the service addressable market, the SAM and the TAM, and all these different metrics for evaluating if they're going to have a successful business model. And I respect that, but I don't subscribe to it personally. I look instead at the reverse of that, which is to start with a problem. What is a problem that needs to be solved, is only going to get worse, and if I don't solve it, nobody else will. And then I go about tackling it and reverse engineering into that the business model. So the business model for me comes last instead of first. Sometimes that's problematic, of course, but to me, the problem, the human need, is really what should be at the core of it, because that's also what gets you out of bed in the morning. That's what inspires you to wake up and put in another 10-hour day. When you're doing a startup, it's exhausting. It takes every bit of energy you have. And if you're doing it simply motivated by the money, the cash out at the end of the day, that might be a little hollow. I prefer to think of it as success being seen in the number of people helped, the number of children who don't have to have scoliosis surgery, the number of amputees who are eager to show themselves, the number of people who are healthy and fit who otherwise would have been couch potatoes. That to me is the metric. And if I can survive, if I can make enough salary to feed myself and my family, that's a bonus.
Well, and I would imagine being the cool house with that machine, your kids are probably very popular.
It's actually funny. My son is a skinny, nerdy kid at school, but he's in phenomenal shape because he uses this machine more than probably anyone alive. And he can do things on it that I don't even know are possible. And I made the machine. He's showing me some amazing tricks that he can pull off. But the catch is that when he has a day off school, the kids gather around him the day before and ask him to come to his dad's work with him. And so all of a sudden, I've got a room full of 13-year-old kids, and they're all fighting over who can use the machine, who can go climbing or paddleboarding or shooting pod racers or flying through the canyons or giant robot boxing. They're all over this, and they get sweaty and exhausted by the end of it. And what's amazing about it is that they're fighting over who gets to use it. If you were to give a bunch of 13-year-old kids chin up bars, bench press, dumbbells, curls, you might get 2 minutes of activity out of them and then they'd move on because they don't have the attention span for that. But here they will use the machine until I physically have to pull them off of it and get on with my day. So that tells me that, yeah, there's some success in that. If you can create a physical full body experience that is so much richer than any game that they will ever encounter on their screens, then we've solved the problem.
Well, how interesting that you go after solving a problem for humanity and you end up blessing your own family with deeper relationship. Well done.
He's excited. He's pretty thrilled to be able to be like the best athlete imaginable in a virtual activity.
It's pretty cool. So you've created designs that are in the Cooper Hewitt Smithsonian Design Museum's permanent collection. You've taught at some of the world's top universities. You've founded two companies that address very real human needs, Scott. What do you want your legacy to be when people look back at what you built, both the products and the impact? What do you hope they say?
I hope that the legacy is that the technology grows and proliferates beyond what I started. So, for example, when 3D Systems bought my company Bespoke, I insisted that they don't enforce the intellectual property that they were buying with it. And so we actually wrote contracts that were had very minimal enforcing of the IP. The reason is that I never created patents. The 46 patents were never created to lock anyone out of the technology. It's just that you have to do it to build value in your company. It's a necessary task. So I get excited when people send me emails that show pictures of people knocking off my designs because that means great. They're advancing beyond what I originally started. I don't think anybody gains by amputees being limited because somebody wrote a patent that is going to block a technology that would otherwise help them. So, what I hope is that all these ideas just grow and expand and proliferate in ways that we can't even imagine now because technology is only going to move forward and creative designers are going to keep graduating from school and building on their predecessors, and that's what I get excited about.
So, if you didn't have to spend your time pitching investors or thinking about revenue to launch your projects, what would you spend your time doing? Like, what really lights you up beyond the entrepreneurial journey you're on?
You know, it's the entrepreneurial journey is a means to an end. It is a way to solve problems through ideas and through design. And if money was no object, I would love to have a Skunkworks, which is a collection of people with very little oversight and very little mandate to explore some very creative, nuanced challenges that the world faces.
Skunkworks is a new term for me, so help me understand what you're saying.
The Skunkworks is something that I've always been a big fan of. It was a group that was a secret subset within Lockheed Aircraft Company, and this was back in World War One, World War Two time. They came up with crazy ideas that could only have come out of an environment where there was no oversight. And they had a bunch of smart people in a dark room that had high security around it, so nobody could get in. And they came up with the wildest ideas. the P-38 and stealth planes and the U-2 spy plane and the Blackbird spy plane and a bunch of other things that we probably have no idea about. And that's what happens when you have a group that can escape the distraction of seeking funding constantly and seeking revenues and marketability as their north star, and instead look at how do you solve a problem and what is the problem, what unorthodox approach are we going to require if we're going to address it. That is really what you mean when you say skunkworks.
Sounds fascinating, man. So, what's the most important lesson you've learned about identifying problems worth solving? Because you've hit on a few. How do you know when something is really worth the sacrifice? Like what you did years ago, living on a dime for a year to pursue. How do you know, Scott?
You know, I don't know that I know. And I've taken some really hard lessons that way. I put a lot of energy down areas that just can't earn enough revenue to self-sustain. So we'd solved something called spinal muscle atrophy, which is just a hideous condition that some people face. And that technology is on the shelf because it doesn't have a marketability. We can't fund it. And it pains me that people will continue to suffer for that when there's a solution on the shelf. But without the marketability, without that MBA sign of approval, it will only ever be shelved. That is one of the things that I have the hardest time with is disassociating a need and a solution because that marketing business angle doesn't get fulfilled. The third part of that triad isn't solved. And it's an eternal challenge for me because I don't focus on the marketability. I focus on the problem solving.
No, I get it. It's clear. Yeah. But I think that's how you get these brilliant ideas as well.
I have shelves and shelves of sketchbooks and designs and prototypes of solutions that will probably never see the light of day simply because they don't meet certain metrics for the what is
Profitability.
worth profitability and what's worth pursuing and whatnot. And it also pains me to see so much stuff that's highly profitable that's also highly useless. So unfortunately, that's just the nature
Oh,
of capitalism when it meets innovation.
how well said. Yeah. Okay, so this question is really more for designers, entrepreneurs, innovators who might be listening. If you could give a piece of advice that would make an immediate impact on how they approach their work, what would it be?
Well, designers, fortunately, are like architects in the sense that they don't go into the profession because they think they're going to make a fortune. So I think that fundamentally they're off on the right tack. They're there because they are solving something, whether it's self-expression or a need to be a creative, or they're just a very left-handed thinker. And this seems to be the place where they are naturally going to end up. So they're off to the right place. The thing is that they have to realize that it's going to take a lot of energy and a lot of exploration, a lot of creativity, and a lot of going renegade if you're going to break out of the molds. Because being a designer is being challenged increasingly by AI, by offshoring, by just the efficiency of the tools that we now have. And so, any designer graduating now from Carnegie Mellon or Rhode Island School of Design or Art Center, they had some real challenges that my generation never faced. And so they're going to have to really expand the definition of designer to also be business person, engineer, marketer, innovator, entrepreneur. Just being an industrial designer doesn't work anymore.
Yeah, perhaps. Maybe just, finding the right partnerships along the way as well. Because if you're going to really be a great designer, spreading yourself so thin has its compromises that don't always function well either.
Yeah, IDEO calls it being a T-shaped person, that you have to have your breadth and you have to have your depth. I would tend to say you have to be an M-shaped person because you have to have a couple different verticals of depth, subject matter expertise, but then you have to have also a whole lot of breadth on top of it. And the more of all of those components, the more you're suited to be an industrial designer when you hit the real world.
Well, Scott, this has been absolutely fascinating and inspiring. So I want to thank you for sharing your story, your vision, and your humanity with us today. So for listeners,
Well, thanks, Chris.
yeah, absolutely. But for listeners who may want to see your work, learn more about ethereal matter, or connect with you, where should they go?
Our website is ethereal-matter.com. My previous design is on Summit ID. That's SUMMITID.com. And I can be found any number of places on LinkedIn and off those websites. If somebody is in Northern California, I can give them a live demo on the machine here. I do that a couple times a week, and it's pretty fun because it's just unimaginable. It's a very surreal experience, and anybody is welcome to come give it a shot.
That's very generous. So, to our listeners, thank you for joining us on Beyond the Numbers today. So, if you've enjoyed this conversation, and I trust you have, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who needs to hear Scott's message about designing with empathy and building businesses that restore dignity and joy to people's lives. So, until the next time, remember the best decisions happen where money meets meaning and purpose. Have a wonderful day, everyone. See you next time.
Beyond the Numbers podcast requires more than a conversation. It takes action, research, and collective wisdom. If today's episode resonated with you, we'd love to hear your insights. Join the conversation and help us shape the future together. We'll be back with more stories, strategies, and real-world solutions that are making a difference for everyone. In the meantime, be sure to subscribe, rate, write a review, and share it with someone you think would benefit from it too. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.